it's angled, but it's going to come on there.
Okay, and we're rolling open in 3, 2.
Hello, my name is Dean Contover, and today we have an interesting subject matter. It's going to be Cuba. We have Dr. Ligia Domenech. She's been to Cuba recently, and I think you've traveled quite a few times, haven't you?
Yes.
Yeah, we're going to talk about Cuba today. Not Cuba in 1959 when Castro took it over. We're going to talk about it today. So how you get there, if you want to visit there. We have an embassy that opened up recently. Obama was there from March 21st to the 22nd of 2016. And of course, the former president, because he wasn't a leader at the time, Fidel Castro, died on November 25th, 2016. So we're going to talk about Cuba, what to do, and I have a couple of books that you can read. Lydia told me that this is a good book if you're interested in reading Fidel Castro, My Life. And I'm going to show it to you. This is one of the books. And also another book who was involved in the revolution in Cuba is Che Guevara, Espanol. And that's another book. Famous international revolutionary. Okay, so Cuba is an island of 12 million people. We have diplomatic relations with them. Unbeknownst to a lot of people, we did have a mission there. It was under the Swiss embassy, and we had a charge of affairs. What a charge of affairs is usually the second in charge of any embassy. Usually you have an ambassador, and then you have the charge of affairs, and you have the first secretary, second secretary, third secretary. So we did have a charge of affairs there, and he handled anything for the United States. Were you there before we had diplomatic relations, or after, or both?
You mean in 2000? Now it's
yeah.
recent.
Yeah.
I was in the first time in 1982, so
okay,
I was
wow.
a long time ago.
Okay, yeah.
And then we went in December of last year, so a year ago, and then this May I went again.
Oh, okay.
2016. So those are my 3 visits.
Let's go back. Things are changing in Cuba, right? Slowly but surely. People, they want to know this. Can you get electronics here and cell phones, right?
If you can find them, and you know, the problem with the embargo is that is a limitation to what the Cubans have access to. Not because the government prohibits them from getting those electrical appliances or cell phones. It's because they are not there. They don't have access in the markets because they have to import them. And if they get access, they're quite expensive because they come from third countries typically.
Okay. Right.
And that's the constraint. But yes, everybody in Cuba that we met had cell phones.
Oh.
I didn't see anybody without a cell phone.
Oh, no kidding. Wow.
No.
Wow, that's interesting. See, that's why I want to bring it up. I mean, it's not, it's not as, I don't want to say bad because I've never been there, but I mean, it's just one of those things that...
it's no big difference from being in Puerto Rico, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
It's like being in Puerto Rico.
Oh.
But with the quality of life is enhanced there by all the things that the government provides in exchange for the work of the people.
Right. Okay. So let's say the government provides doctors, a medical system. They send doctors to Venezuela because Venezuela sends oil to Cuba because they don't develop petroleum products.
Yes.
So there's a lot of doctors. Looking this up, I was really surprised.
But they send doctors everywhere in the world, not only to Venezuela.
Right.
They have right now more doctors abroad than the WHO, the World Health Organization.
Wow.
So they have thousands, hundreds of thousands
When we talk about doctors, it's about training in regards to the United States. It usually takes 8 years to be a physician here. Is it usually 8 years there?
Yes, but it's different in the sense that in Cuba, when you go to university, it's not like here that the first 2 years is basically repetition of high school, when you have to get again the same, math and the science. No, you go directly to what you're gonna be doing. So it's the same 8 years, but I will consider it even more intense because you don't have to do 2 years of repetition of high school.
Right. Speaking of education, I noticed that a lot of Eastern Europe bloc countries, before they became free of the yoke of communism, that literacy was almost 100% in a lot of these countries. And do you know what the literacy rate is in Cuba?
Yeah, it's 99.8.
Is it 99.8?
Well, the last time I checked, it was 99.8.
Okay.
Yep.
So they're well educated. So this is what was told to me years ago, that the grandparents, which usually are 4, never got an education, but their grandchild is getting an education. So if their grandchild is getting, or grandchildren are getting an education, they're going to be supportive of the regime.
Of course. Wouldn't you? I mean, they have, the people before the revolution, most Cubans had no access to health, decent health, or education, opportunities to become better themselves in art, access to culture, nothing. They just worked very, very hard and were overexploited. And this was a tremendous change for them. Knowing that nobody will ever evict them from their homes. I mean, because all the houses belong to the state, and you have the right to have a house by constitution. Right. And I mean, it's a safety net that will allow them to be more creative in other areas. Because when you have to live every day,
oh, that's a good point.
Paycheck to paycheck with these fears and all these concerns that people have, it's hard to go to a ballet and sit down and enjoy it, or things like that. I think that is important. It's not a coincidence that the level of alphabetization, the level of reading. I mean, when in Cuba they do every year the book fair, and 60% of the population attend. 60% of the whole island goes to Havana to participate. So that tells you, I mean, when they do a film festival, it's not a little amount of people. Everybody gets the opportunity, and they actually support those activities.
Are they aware of the United States? I mean, they're 90 miles away from Florida.
Sure.
I mean, in 90 miles, you could pick up American radio stations pretty easy in Cuba.
Sure.
So you can listen to the music, whether it's in English or whether it's in Spanish. I mean,
and they have, some people, if they can afford it, they can have cable TV. They have access to cable TV.
All right.
They also have in the newspapers in Cuba every day. Whatever is happening in the U.S. and if it's something important, they have it in the news there. Right. So the radio station where I did a few programs there, they're international. They transmit in 8 different languages. I mean, they're very well connected with the rest of the world.
Voice of America, is that what
No, that's what is made from Florida.
Yeah, I understand that, but I mean, but they broadcast all over.
I'm not sure, but I bet you they have better.
When I listen to shortwave, I listen to Radio Havana in Espanol. So I mean, not that I speak it or understand it, but I know they do say.
But if you check Radio Havana Internacional, if you check in the internet, you can hear it in English. They transmit in English and in Portuguese, in French. They have 8 different languages.
All right, let's say I want to go there, right, and see what it's like. What do I do? Do I get a visa? I have to have a passport?
Okay.
I mean,
yes, you need a passport, definitely a passport. Okay. And to get inside of Cuba is as going to any other place, like going to Argentina.
Right.
Once you get there, they're gonna do the passport, and you go in. When I went last time, I went through Mexico, and I bought the visa in Mexico.
Now you're allowed to go because you're an educator.
This time I went that way, but before that I went through other countries, which technically is illegal, but That's how I did it.
Okay.
Yeah, but
So in
this
other
last
words,
time
you
I went
flew-
legally.
You flew to Canada, and from Canada
Yes.
you flew to
And no
Cuba.
questions
Yeah,
asked. And the
right.
visa is, I didn't have to buy a visa before. In Mexico, they make you buy a visa
I
before
see.
you get into the plane.
Right.
It depends on the countries and the relations between the countries.
Right.
But once you go to Cuba, there's no limitation. I mean, there's not a visa with a little note on it that you cannot go to certain places or anything like that. You can go anywhere and do anything. The problem is here, because this country bans going there without one of those, I think are 16 different categories of travelers that are allowed. And I went because I was doing a presentation there. So I went as a professional scholar doing a presentation, but you can go for sports purposes, and you can go by like an artist to do a concert. You can go with a church to do some church work there. Some are about investments. There are different categories. Cultural travel, but then that you have to go with certain companies that the US allows to make these cultural groups to travel there. So only those companies.
Right.
It's not because you say, I'm going to go there and do cultural stuff. I'm a cultural traveler. No, it's certain companies only. So, and it's quite expensive to buy those packets.
Well, I just saw the other day that they had a flight leave Florida, was it, to Havana?
Now they have direct flights.
Direct
yes,
flights.
Yes.
I saw a ship
Yes.
go into Havana Harbor, and I'm sure they overwhelmed Havana when walking around and looking and buying and so forth.
Yes.
The time, I think, is to go now before things change.
Well, when you go there, you'll see that the Habaneros are very happy to receive people, and you can even go into their houses. I mean, they're very, very welcoming with
Now, where did you
tourists.
stay?
Well, the first time we stayed in a hotel, big hotel, the Cuban hotel, not one of those American hotels.
Okay.
Habana Libre, which was actually the place where all the revolutionaries stayed and organized the government after the revolution triumphed. It used to be the Hilton, but now it's Habana Libre Hotel.
I see.
And now it's administered by Meliá, which is Spain.
Okay.
The Spanish, they have
Well,
investment.
see, if we don't get involved in the United States, all these countries are going to start.
But there's now a Sheraton, which is American already.
There is. All right.
There
See,
is,
I
yes,
mean, all right.
in Miramar.
Okay.
So they do have investment already. And I think it's going to keep happening, but it's going to always be controlled because the government is going to control that. It's like in China, you know, they never let a foreigner own more than 49% of the shares of any investment.
I see.
No, it's a joint investment, and the Cuban government will always have 51
Okay.
or more. It depends on the agreements.
I see.
So when you see the Chinese investing or the Canadians investing or the Spanish investing, it's always the majority of the shares go to the government of Cuba, definitely.
I see. You said that the Chinese were there earlier. We were talking. You said they were building a dock or a port to take large ships.
There's the Brazilians invested in the
Brazil.
Brazilians
Okay.
invested in the port. Cuba, the Chinese has been investing in all kind of transportation also,
Right.
but also, for example, once the Russians, Soviet Union got dissolved in the 1990, and after those years after, there was a big issue. You know, there was a bad time in Cuba. It was a crisis because they call it the special period because they didn't have that support from Russia and the access to the oil from Russia. It was really bad.
That's the big thing.
Those 1990s were tough.
Right.
And immediately in 1992, China came with a lot of bicycles and provided the bicycles. And that was the first investment, was a factory of bicycles
Oh, wow.
with Chinese money in Cuba. And that was the way to move without gas, of course, right?
Yeah. Well, you have to
But that
agree
was just the beginning. Right now, the investments of China surpass the $185 billion a year.
Now, when you were in Cuba, there were military services compulsory or draft. There's a draft. It's 2 years. Male and female also are drafted in the military.
Yes, but it can be substituted with service. If you, for example, you were studying in the School of Medicine,
Okay.
for example, you can go to a village, a town, little town, and do medical services for the 2 years. So they doesn't have to be military. It's a service.
I see. Okay.
Okay.
See. Service to the country.
2 years of service.
Yeah,
yes.
service to the country.
And the logic behind it is because you studied for free, you became a professional for free, then you have to give back. And even if you were not professional, you studied your whole education for free, so you give back.
Now let's talk about the Cuban military. They were involved in the guerrilla war in Angola, right? I think they were involved with Mandela in South Africa. Tell me that story. What's the story?
Well, the thing is that they went to help, and in the Angola and in, oh my God, I always forget this country.
Angola was.
They went to Angola,
Yeah.
but this other country, which it doesn't come out.
Mozambique.
No. Let me see if I have it here.
All right, it's all right.
Yes. They supported this movement of, no, it's not here. Revolution, which were being attacked by the South African government, the white South African government.
Was it Rhodesia that they helped too?
They did.
And Mozambique, probably.
Yes.
I know they helped in Mozambique.
Do you remember, Michael, the name? Oh, okay.
It's all
Okay. So this help that they provided to protect from the white government of South Africa.
The apartheid government we used
They
to call
helped.
it,
They sent their soldiers, and they tried to help, and they actually liberated. And the United States were supporting the government of South Africa in this fight.
Right.
So when Mandela came out of prison, the first country he visited was Cuba, and he went to say thank you for the support to try to stop this apartheid government that was trying to actually go to, extend itself.
Was it the country Namibia?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I know it's
Because
not
that borders South Africa.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
so
I have it someplace where
we've been involved in Cuban history for many, many years. I mean, since the Spanish-American War, 1898, right? And we just progressed. Teddy Roosevelt was at San Juan Hill, etc., and he was one of our presidents. And then Cuba took over. Not Cuba, Castro took over. In regards to Castro, he wasn't a communist when he took over Batista. And Batista, a lot of Americans don't know, he wasn't a good man either.
No, he was not.
Okay. I mean, let's be realistic.
He was the man that was supported by the U.S. government.
No doubt about it.
But inside his country...
And the mobs.
Yeah, the
U.S. mobs.
And it was because the whole country... The relationship became like a patio of the U.S.
Yeah.
Cuba was the place to have fun, entertainment.
Right. I remember as a kid, people used to fly from New York City to Havana to have fun.
Honeymoons were there.
And after that was shut down by Fidel, right? Las Vegas got built up.
Yeah, so it's good for the tourists who come have fun, but for the Cubans who don't have access to any of that fun and are just working in those plantations that belong to American companies, it was a control of over 80% of the infrastructure was owned by American companies, including the telephones, including transportation. So it was all the richness, the wealth produced by the Cuban workers was taken out of the country, which will never allow the country to develop themselves and become industrialized and everything.
Well, let me ask you the question. There's American Cubans in Florida. Do you think that they would ever go back and control Cuba? Do you think that they won't be allowed? Is that my understanding of it?
The Cubans are not going to allow that to happen. It's not the government, it's the Cubans themselves. The Cubans have gone through a lot with this embargo, a lot of the privation from a lot of things that other people can have and they cannot. And this sacrifice that they have done for their own revolution and the investment, emotional investment, the intellectual investment, they're going to protect that. They're not going to okay, let's finish this revolution after all what they have gone through.
So is it a pipe dream that the Americans think that they're going to take over again?
Oh, it's not going to happen. we asked that, how do you see this approach? Are you concerned
Yeah.
to many Cubans? And they were all told us the same thing. We trust our government. Our government is going to protect us from that. Because they don't want to become capitalists. Of course, in every country, there are people who think differently.
Right, of course.
And there are capitalists
Right.
there who want capitalism to go. But the majority of the Cubans, they value their socialist revolution. And they treasure those tremendous challenges that they went through and also the success that they have had. Because Cuba is an example for the rest of the world in medicine, in education, in health in general, not only medicine, in the control of disease. It's fantastic.
You know what I see in new countries forming? The first thing they put their intellectual people in is education. The Ministry of Education is the premier thing in those countries.
Sure.
And they push everything and anything to get their kids to speak the language and to know their country's history and to learn English and many as a second language.
Sure.
And this is just amazing. And in many cases, I think that we don't put that as a priority. But every country in the world puts
Yes.
education as a priority, and we're going to be behind what they call the 8 ball.
I'm going to give you the numbers.
Okay.
The Cuba invests 10% of their budget is
Right.
in education.
Right.
10%. To give you an idea, Britain, the UK, 4%. The US, 2%.
Wow.
So that gives you an idea of the priorities. And besides that,
What's the literacy rate in the United States? Do you know that, Doctor?
it's more illiterate than Cuba, because Cuba is 99.8.
Well, yeah,
I think
yeah.
the US is 99,
I see.
something
Okay.
like that. So
All right.
it's not,
Yeah.
but in terms of people, it makes a difference.
Yeah.
And they also, not only that, in Cuba, they invite students from all over the world to come and study for free also. And they pay for everything.
Wow.
So you don't do that here.
Now, do you have to learn Spanish? Is that
Yes,
it?
you will
okay,
have to,
yeah,
because that's the language of teaching. But right now, there are over 100 students doing study abroad that goes from the U.S., from universities like Harvard and
Wow.
Yale University.
That's interesting.
And they are doing study abroad for a semester or 2 semesters. And this relationship is going on before the approach. They always were open.
We have a half a minute left. What do you want to say in regards to travel to Cuba? Go see Cuba. Is that?
Definitely, but you have to go with understanding that it's not they have the luxurious hotels, but if you really want to learn how is Cuba, well, then you cannot just sit in a beach the whole day.
That's true,
You
that's
have
true.
to go and be prepared to see lots of scarcity of comforts. That doesn't mean that they are poor, because when they have all their necessities covered, that's not being poor.
Like electricity and
No,
sanitation.
they have, but for example, access to internet is limited
Right.
because they don't have access to
It's coming.
satellite. It's
It's
fiber
coming.
optic cable from
Google-
Venezuela.
2 days ago, Google signed a contract for
They did?
internet. Yeah.
Okay,
I
then it's
read
going to
that.
enhance.
Yeah. So.
But even with that limited access, only cyber cafes and some people who
Right.
can have it because of the work they do, even with that, it has never been limited access. It's not that they cannot go to certain sites. It's open access.
I see.
They don't have limited access like other countries do.
What's going to happen, real quick, if Raul leaves? Who's going to take their place? Is it going to be a younger generation?
There is a guy that is considered probably the best possible candidate. He's right now first vice president, and he might be elected, but there has to be an election because that's something that many people don't know. Cuba has elections.
Right.
It's just a system that is different. It's more parliamentary oriented,
I see.
more like UK.
Yeah.
And the president is not elected directly by the people, but is elected by the assembly that the members are elected by the
Right.
people. So the guy is Miguel Díaz-Canel Bermúdez. He's 55 years old, so he's a lot younger, and he might be, that's what people think might be elected.
Okay.
But we cannot say
Is he
because...
bilingual? Do you know if he's
Well,
or trilingual?
he must be, but most Cubans are, once they go to college, definitely they get English. But right now, Cuba is undergoing a complete revolution in their educational system. When I was there, I got to meet the teachers who are preparing the reform of education,
Right.
and now they're going to have English since kindergarten every day.
I think that's what they should do in this country, listen to the teachers. Instead of dictated from above, it should be coming up from the teachers from the bottom.
Yeah, I met these, and these were teachers from all over the country, and they had them in this hotel for over a month.
Ever done